Let's talk right now, though, about what is going on across the Channel. No, not Channel migrants for once. Let's talk about Marine Le Pen. Just after I got on air yesterday, we learnt the news that Marine Le Pen, the leader of National Rally, three-time presidential candidate in the runoff for the presidency twice, the last two runoffs against Emmanuel Macron, which she lost, she was convicted of embezzlement of EU funds. Basically, conviction is for using funds that she was entitled to when she was an MEP in the European Parliament, but using those back in France for her national party. She's been convicted along with many officials, dozens of officials in her party. The sentence, though, is what has really caused uproar in France and indeed around the world. And the sentence includes not just 4 years, 2 years suspended behind bars and 2 years with a tag and a €100,000 fine, but also a 5-year ban on standing for public office. This has caused outrage among many supporters for her, both at home and abroad, but also actually outrage among even the far left in France over this ruling by a court over who the French public can and cannot vote for. Let's talk about this now with French journalist and writer at the Telegraph, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who joins us. Very good morning to you, Anne-Elisabeth.
Morning.
I have to say, this was quite a shocking result, and it seemed to be a result that, in terms of not the conviction but the sentence, which many in the party were not expecting. They seemed in interviews prior to the conviction to be very relaxed that this wouldn't happen, that this would be seen as kind of a move too far. But what has the general reaction from sort of French people been, whether they are supporters of National Rally, her party, or not?
Well, what's really interesting is that people seem to discover something that has been discussed at length before. And you just quoted the far left now complaining about this. Well, there's a very similar case coming up for Mr. Mélenchon, the leader of Bode, and therefore he doesn't want to be served with the same treatment, which he probably would. The one first thing that has to be said is that Marine Le Pen and her 24 co-defendants in the dock are guilty. It's been proven there were emails of supposed parliamentary assistants working for the European Parliament who would send emails months after they started receiving European salary. Shouldn't I go to Brussels to meet my supposed boss? Including Marine Le Pen's sister. So it's not as if she's not. But on the other hand, she is appealing. And this specific law is a very badly written law that was passed under President François Hollande in a great orgy of political purity. And it provides for the ineligibility sentence not to be conditional to an appeal. Marine Le Pen is appealing, and in normal law, she would be considered innocent until the last judgment has been passed. And in this instance, she is barred from running from now. And that's what is creating the trouble.
And we may not see a result of any appeal for a year and a half or so. And of course, that makes it difficult. No doubt at all, she is, by a small margin, the front runner to win the next presidential election, to get into the runoff, as she's done the last two times. This would be her fourth attempt. She said it would be her last attempt. We don't, of course, know who she'd be running against, even if she could stand, because Macron not standing for a third term. But there's no doubt at all, in terms of the snap elections that were called by Macron last spring, that we did see National Rally becoming, the single biggest party. They've got a huge support, growing support, particularly among young people, spreading across the nation. A lot of people are saying that actually this could help her party rather than hinder it, because of the outcry over the idea that, unelected judges are imposing this sentence for political reasons, as she herself claimed last night on TV.
Well, we've never had a tradition of electing judges in France, and they're all civil servants.
No, but they're unaccountable to the people. Whereas the people could make a decision about, they could say, you're convicted of embezzlement, we don't want you to be our presidential candidate, but they're not going to be given that option.
They have handed her a victim card. If they condemned her and said, you are guilty of this, was proven, and then she'd appealed, it's entirely different. She's now sort of using the victim card. And even people who are not personally concerned with this are worried about the principle of the law. France is a country that always had problems with party finance, with the result that when we passed a moralizing law for party financing that was allowed to citizens, because corporations are not allowed to give any money to parties, it was passed in 1988. It is about £7,000 per person, so you can pay a maximum £14,000 when you're a couple. And that amount has not changed since 1988 because nobody dared up it, just as in the instance of the expenses scandal in Britain, nobody had upped the salaries of MPs for a long time because that was also supposed to be unpopular. And that I'm not excusing her, but that explains a few things.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I've covered the EU an awful lot as the political editor, and we know, the EU, I can't even remember the last year, I'm sure you can't, of where they actually had their finances signed off, the actual European Union, the European Commission. There is a huge amount of corruption, fraud, embezzlement, and God knows what going on a grand scale with EU funds, both in nationwide countries, among MEPs. I've no doubt at all about it that she committed this crime along with these officials, but the choice to bring prosecution against her and her party as opposed to against other parties, I'm very sceptical that wasn't a political decision. And in terms of the punishment, again, whether one holds a card for her or not, we think back to 2016, Christine Lagarde, a former French finance minister, then at the head of the World Bank, the IMF. She was found guilty of negligence over national funds, public funds that went to a private company. She always said she was innocent, but when she was found guilty, there wasn't even a punishment, and she was reconfirmed as the boss of the IMF. I think most people think that...
I can't say this. I can't say this because basically Christine Lagarde, who is a lawyer, she was at the head of a large American law firm, and after 20 years of an incredible tug of war between a French businessman and a kind of Alan Sugar, if you like, and the government, she went and she said, look, we need an arbitration in this case. And she named 3 of the best lawyers in France, including one from the Constitutional that had been on the Constitutional Council. They looked at the arbitration. She was not involved in this. She was just the minister. And they said, well, actually, you do owe him money. And she was then accused of that. And that was a fix. That was a much more transparent fix. She was not only innocent. She'd done her job. It's just that there's no such tradition of arbitration rather than...
Okay, you're saying that's not a direct example. What about the outcry we've seen from sort of the liberal left over what's been happening in Romania with an opposition leader being barred from election? What's happened with in Turkey with Erdogan banning the mayor of Istanbul from standing outcry? Everyone's out in arms. But, oh, well, if it's someone we don't agree with, Marine Le Pen, so-called far right, well, then it's OK. This is the sort of stuff that kind of did for the Democrats in America, isn't it? Isn't there a risk where the lawfare, even the perception of lawfare being used, I thought lots of the cases against Donald Trump were bang to rights, but the decision of when to charge him and when to push those cases was seen by many, and including by me, as political, that this actually could do more damage to the people who were supporting it and could actually help because, of course, there are alternative candidates for the French president, including Bardella.
Yes, Bardella is the obvious candidate. I mean, when the whole case came to fruition a month ago, he said, if Marine Le Pen is ineligible and I run for president and I win, I will immediately take her as my prime minister, which is his right, by the way. He can do that, no matter what she's been condemned about. But that was a year ago, or almost, and the election is in 27 if Macron doesn't call one before. And we do not know whether he will abide by promises made so long after the fact. So we don't know. It might mean the end of her career.
Yeah, I mean, that's many people are saying that. She'd already said this would be the last time she'd run. But there's no doubt at all in terms of the rise of parties, disparaged as far right. My God, the party is the Front National very much was a far right party, moved very much more to the centre. Giorgio Bardella, for instance, the son of migrants himself, very different figure. We've seen the success of Giorgia Meloni in Italy, once considered far right, beyond the pale, now absolutely in the fold of the G7 leaders. We've seen the rise rise of the AfD in Germany, the rise of Reform, topping the polls. In the UK, a poll the other day saying more people think that Nigel Farage would make a good Prime Minister than any of the other party leaders. I mean, at the end of the day, do you think that this rise of the right, whatever we'll call it, hard right, that actually this is now unstoppable?
I think they're not comparable. I think the populists in Europe are like Tolstoy's Unhappy Families. They're all populist in a different way, and some of them are actually getting places, and Giorgia Meloni is a very good example. And some of those are still a bit unsavory. If you take the AfD, it's like Germany, it's regionalized, and some people within the AfD are good, and some people within the AfD are frankly scary. I think we should take them one by one.
That's a very, very good point. That's a very good point. Just if you had to get, I mean, obviously we don't know how an appeal would go, what happens. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think she'll end up being able to stand?
There are now calls by neutral people, not self-interested, saying this law was badly written and it should be changed, which would be interesting. There's also a recourse to the French Constitutional Council. Another MP from an overseas territory who has he's suffering exactly the same problem, and he put this, the Council of State, the administrative tribunal, put this to the Constitutional Council. If the Constitutional Council decides, actually the Constitutional Council has more or less expressed what they will say in 2 days, and they said there must be freedom for the judges to express their judgment, which is the law is not unconstitutional. Judges can be, they do not, it's not compulsory for the judges to take this practice. And it's basically lobbing the responsibility to the specific judges who took that decision.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's going to work out. So there's a good chance that she will not be able to run.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. It really is. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, French journalist and writer at the Telegraph. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.